What's going on, duelists? It's your boy Nick, bringing you for the first time on the channel a Volcanic deck profile for the March 2024 format. For those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name is Nick. We do Yu-Gi-Oh content mainly focused around rogue and casual decks alike. If that's the kind of Yu-Gi-Oh content that you're interested in, then I highly encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We are currently working our way to 1,500 subscribers, and we are so close, and I need your help to get there. So with that being said, Volcanic. This has to be one of the most iconic legacy decks that this game has conceived. Obviously, you guys all know the jokes and the memes regarding Pain 96 and just asking on every single Konami video about Volcanic support, and well, they finally delivered. This was towards the end of last year in the Soul Burner side set. We finally got actual Volcanic support, and guess what? It's actually good. Like, it's not just, you know, bulk or just, something you're just going to shove aside and never look at again. This support actually slaps, or burns more, I should say. And this is my take on Volcanic. It's a 45 card deck list, and I'm not saying that this is the definitive version of the deck, nor am I saying that it's the most competitive, but this is my version, and as usual, I always put a little bit of my own twist on it. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. Like I said, 45 card list. So we're going to start off with the monster lineup, of course. And we're starting things off with the first copy of Volcanic Emperor. It's a 1-of in the deck. It's a level 8 Pyro Fire Monster with 3,100 attack, 2,400 defense, and it is the retrain, I guess, of the old Volcanic Doomfire that they used to have as their old boss monster. Now, this card cannot be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned from the hand or the graveyard by banishing 3 Pyro monsters or 1 Blaze Accelerator card from your face-up field and or graveyard. So that's a very good summoning condition. Like, this deck just prides itself on being able to put a lot of Pyro monsters in the grave, as well as this Blaze Accelerator cards. So having this guy just be a free summon from the hand or grave by banishing 3 Pyros or a Blaze Accelerator is very, very strong. In addition to that, when he's summoned this way, you can inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each banished Pyro monster. So that can obviously stack and get to some ridiculous numbers depending how many banished Pyros you have. But in addition to that, if you do the burn, you can also set a Volcanic Trap directly from your deck to your field. Very strong effect. There are 2 new Volcanic Traps that we'll talk about later in the profile. And then the last effect he has, which in my opinion is my favorite, it is a non-activated continuous effect that states, each time your opponent special summons a monster or monsters, you inflict 500 damage to them. So this card is just insane. Like, you could literally just burn them on your turn with all of your effects, then summon this and sit on this and watch your opponent struggle to out it while they burn themselves to summon bodies that can actually deal with this. It's the best, and this card, 1-of is more than enough. I did kind of toy around with playing multiple copies of it. I was working on a 50 card variant of this list that was running a bit more quantities of some of the stuff and a little bit more non-engine, but I opted to run the 45 card variant just because I wanted something that was a bit more consistent. So right now, 1 Volcanic Emperor is more than enough. Up next, we have 2 copies of Volcanic Rocket, the original starter for this theme. Upon being summoned, you can add a Blaze Accelerator card from the deck or graveyard to your hand. So very cool right there. And then there is a brand new Blaze Accelerator card that was introduced with the new wave of support that we'll be discussing later, but Volcanic Rocket is able to search that, as well as the OG, well, not OG, but the Tri-Blaze Accelerator or Blaze Accelerator Reload, as it's called, that we got a few years back. But up next, we have 3 copies of their new starter, Volcanic Trooper. Now, this card is amazing. Upon being normal or special summoned, he allows you to add any Volcanic card from the deck to your hand, so just being an in-archetypal searcher is really strong. In addition to that, as a secondary effect, you can discard a card for cost to then special summon a bomb token to the opponent's field. It is a Pyro Fire level 1, attack 1,000, defense 1,000 to the opponent's field, and then each time a bomb token is destroyed, its controller takes 500 damage. So, like, you basically give him a free body, but what's important about Trooper is the discard cost. There's so many cards in this deck that want to be in the graveyard naturally, and the fact that Trooper can discard them for cost to activate that effect is very, very powerful. So you want to max out on Trooper. It's pretty much the best starter in the theme, right behind Volcanic Rocket. Up next, I know a lot of versions of this deck choose not to run this package, but I am, because I just do it for the lulz, and I wanted to have, you can't not play Volcanics and not run Scattershot. I'm sorry. Like, there's a lot of deck lists that choose to omit this card. I couldn't do it. Like, this card is just too funny not to play in this deck. So we are maxing out on triple copies of Scattershot. A lot of you should know how this works, but for those of you that don't, It states, when this card is sent to the graveyard, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Then, if this card is sent to the graveyard by the effect of a Blaze Accelerator card, you can send 2 Volcanic Scatter Shots from your hand and or deck to the graveyard, and then destroy all monsters your opponent controls. So this is basically a Raigeki with 1500 total burn damage, because each Scatter Shot will burn for 500 in succession. So just really, really cool. I know a lot of decks don't run this because, again, they're a bit bricky at times. They're not starters and they're not extenders. And drawing these obviously isn't that great. You want to just be sending them with the Blaze Accelerator cards to the graveyard. But like I said, I couldn't build Volcanics and not include this card. So like I said, this isn't really the most consistent version of the deck, but it is my version. And I still think that despite having the Scatter Shots in this deck still actually does really, really well, and it's a lot of fun to play. So with that being said, moving on, we do play a triple copies of the Volcanic Shell. This is an amazing card, the most simplest of effects. Basically, once on a soft once per turn, you can pay 500 life points to add a Volcanic Shell from your deck to your hand. This card must be in the graveyard to activate and resolve this effect. So the whole point of this deck is to load up the graveyard with a shell, and then use its effect to constantly keep adding more shells to your hand, giving you fodder for your Blaze Accelerator effects, which is obviously very strong. So you definitely max out on shells. There's not a single version of this deck that doesn't play 3 copies of this card. So just keep that in mind. If you guys try to build this by yourselves, you definitely need 3 shells mandatory. Up next is 2 copies of Volcanic Rimfire, their newest level 1 monster for the theme that came with their new wave of support. I've seen some lists play 3 of this, but I felt that 3 was kind of bricky. I think 2 is the sweet spot for this card. It has 2 effects, both of which are graveyard triggers, and you can use each effect in the same turn. The first effect states that if this card sent to grave, you can banish this card from grave, and if you do, you send a Volcanic monster from your deck to the graveyard except himself, so he's pretty much a Foolish Burial in a monster form. And then the other effect is if he's sent to the graveyard, you can banish a Blaze Accelerator card from your face-up field or grave, and if you do, place a Blaze Accelerator continuous spell or trap from your hand or deck face-up on your field. So he allows you to activate your Blaze Accelerator cards from the deck, as well as acts as a Foolish Burial. Again, you can use each effect in the same turn, however, the trigger condition is him being sent to the graveyard. So, I mean, he can only go to the grave once, and then you'd obviously have to try and find a combo to revive it, and then send it to grave again if you wanted to use the each effect in the same turn. But otherwise, an amazing card, really good support. So you play 2 copies of that. Then up next, we play 1 copy of Awakening of the Possessed, Greater Inari Fire. This is basically Hida's Fire Dog as a monster card. Now this card is a goofy effect. It's an inherent summon, like a Cyber Dragon, but from the deck. The stipulation states you have to send a face-up spellcaster monster and a face-up level 4 or lower fire monster you control to the grave, and then you special summon this card from the deck on a non-activated effect. Now, why is this important? Well, when this card is summoned, you burn your opponent equal to the attack of 1 monster they control. In addition to that, when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can search for a Spiritual Fire art card or a possessed spell trap from deck to hand. So I know some Volcanic lists, again, choose not to run this for consistency reasons, but again, I couldn't play this deck and not run this combo. You know, him being able to have a really cool summoning condition and burn on summon is so useful, especially for going second. And then the trap card that he searches also guarantees that this deck does have a pseudo FTK of sorts, which again, I can actually show you guys in a combo tutorial if you guys want to see that. Just comment down below if you guys want to see combos and test hands for this deck. But 1 copy of this card is more than enough. You definitely don't want to draw it. So the fact that we're playing a bigger card count at 45 cards is beneficial to this list, because there is quite a few things you just don't want to see in your hand, that being one of them. Up next, now we're getting into some more of the non-engine stuff, but I wanted ways to increase this deck's overall consistency. So we're doing that by playing a Horus package, consisting of 3 copies of Imseti, Glory of Horus, 1 Duomatef, Blessing of Horus, and 1 Happy Guidance of Horus. We're choosing not to play the Cubenisef, the Protector, I believe is his name, of Horus, just because I feel like just having the 3 individual names, the 1 Glory, 1 Blessing, and 1 Guidance, is perfectly fine for the purposes that we need it for. Plus, it also cleans up the deck count a little bit because, you know, Guidance and Duomatef, or Blessing, are just, you know, Horus monsters you don't want to draw, Cubenisef being a 3rd. So I wanted to mitigate the amount of bricks this deck was playing. You really just want to see Imseti as the combo starter. And again, because there's so many Volcanics that want to be in the graveyard in this deck, the Horus package was just basically an auto-include in my opinion. Just having a great way to get bodies to the graveyard, while also having free summons from grave to make plays with. Also, something really cool to note is that Imseti is a spellcaster monster. So as long as you can put an Imseti on the field and a level 4 lower fire, you can send them both to grave to actually summon out your greater Inari fire from the deck, which I thought was really, really cool. So that's our Horus package. Obviously, in the Horus, you know, you have a whole tons of rank 8 access by playing that. So I just feel like it's a very great engine for this deck. Now, in addition to that, because again, I wanted this deck to be as pushed as it could, we are also playing a Diabellstar, the Black Witch. You know, we are also playing the Wanteds, but we'll talk about that when we get to the spells. But one Diabellstar, the Black Witch, again, just helps facilitating getting your cards that you need to the graveyard in the graveyard to summon herself, while also searching you some very powerful Snake Eye spells and traps, which we'll talk about in a bit. But one copy is all you need. And then we are also playing one copy of Snake Eye Oak. I chose not to play a bigger Snake Eye package in this deck because I didn't really want to take away from Volcanics in this list. Again, personal preference. I'm not saying that's the best choice, but it's the choice that I chose to make. Obviously, like I talked about earlier, there was a 50-card version of this deck that I toyed around with that did play a bigger Snake Eye package. So if you guys want to run the Snake Eye stuff, you are perfectly fine in doing so. It does not conflict with this deck in any capacity, but for the purposes of my profile, I'm just choosing to stick with the one Oak, mainly because Oak is very good at recycling a lot of your banished Rimfires and or your Volcanic Shells, or getting them back from the graveyard and whatnot. So one copy of Oak is very good in this list. And then moving on, rounding out the monster lineup, we just play a playset of Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. Really good hand trap in this deck, especially since this is build is more focused on the burn aspect of Volcanics. Ghost Mourner just having the effect to negate an opponent's monster, and then if that monster leaves the field, they take damage equal to its attack. Just, you know, is really beneficial to this deck's playstyle. So this is the only hand trap this list is actually playing. Again, if you choose to play a 50-card variant, you can squeeze in more hand traps if you choose, but that's just my own opinion. Now moving on to the spells, we play 3 copies of Bonfire. It is really, really sad that this card is as expensive as it is. I know a lot of people that are not interested in Snake Eyes, you know, and just wanted to play fun decks like Volcanics, for example, are paywalled behind this really insanely expensive search card. I really hope this card gets a reprint soon, but unfortunately, if you want to play Volcanics in their most consistent form, you are unfortunately going to need to buy Bonfires. You know, it's a rota for the archetype, basically, which speaks volumes. You know, it definitely increases consistency, so you do need to max out at 3 copies. Unfortunately, as much as it sucks, but it kind of is what it is. Up next, obviously, you play the 3 King Sarcophagus to facilitate the Horus package. You either want to see the King Sark in your hand, or you want to see Imseti in your hand. Those are the combo starters, basically, because Sark is able to just send, you know, your Volcanics to grave to mill Horus monsters, and then if you have Imseti, it kind of does the same thing while also searching the Sark anyway. And then, you know, using cards like Volcanic Shell in tandem with the Horus package just feels so unfair. It's absolutely hilarious. So just 3 copies of King Sark. Then, like I was mentioning before, we do play the 1 Diabellstar, so we also play the 3 copies of Wanted. Now, again, this package, the Horus package, I think, is kind of mandatory. The Wanted package, you know, the Diabellstar Snake Eye stuff is optional. You know, I know some of this stuff is pretty expensive. But again, I'm just trying to make this deck as consistent as possible. That's why I chose to include it. But, you know, we are playing the 3 copies of Wanted to grant us access into our Diabellstar, followed by the 1 copy of Original Sinful Spoils, which can get us into a lot of stuff aside from Snake Eye Oak. It can get us into a Rimfire or a Shell on the field that we can just use as link fodder to make other plays, while also triggering, you know, the Shell effect engrave and the Rimfire effect engrave. So very good card here in this list. Up next, we are on 2 copies of the brand new Volcanic Blaze Accelerator, followed by the original Blaze Accelerator. We just have to play this card as a 1-of brick in this deck, because in order to activate Volcanic Blaze Accelerator, you have to send the original Blaze Accelerator from your hand, deck, or face-up field to the graveyard as cost. But a Volcanic Blaze is a really, really strong card. It allows you to special summon a Volcanic monster from your hand once per turn. In addition to that, you can also target a monster your opponent controls. Then you can send a level 1 Pyro from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, you destroy that monster. So a very cool card, not only allowing you to break boards going second, but also helping you Foolish Burial your combo pieces to grave to get your engine going is very, very powerful. But I think a 2-in-1 ratio is perfect. I know some lists choose to play 3 Accelerator. I do think at times this card can be bricky because you can only control 1 Accelerator on board at a time. So drawing this card in duplicates doesn't feel that great in my opinion. So I just tried to clean the list up as much as possible. Then up next, we're on 1 copy of Fire Rejection and 1 Fire Recovery. I struggled with the counts on these cards. A part of me wants to play 2 and 2, but again, this is a 45 card list. I was trying to minimize the deck count of this list as much as I could. If you are comfortable with playing a bigger deck count, like something closer to 50 or better, then I would definitely recommend increasing the counts of both of these cards. Fire Ejection just being a Foolish Burial plus burn damage, or it allows you to also produce a token on the opponent's field, a bomb token, the same token that Trooper produces is really strong. And then Fire Recovery, well, basically being a recovery for all your fire stuff. It's a monster reborn from the graveyard, and then on field it's a monster reborn, excuse me, and then out of the graveyard by banishing itself, it can take up to three banished pyros or pyros that are in your grave, shuffle them into the deck, and then you draw a card. So this is a great way to recover either your scatter shots to do it again, or recover cards like your volcanic shells to keep your shells in a continuous rotation, which is obviously very strong. So 1-1 for this particular list I felt was fine. And that rounds out the spell cards. Now we're moving into the traps. Again, this is a 45 card list. We are playing 2 copies of the Blaze Accelerator Reload. This card's name becomes Tri-Blaze Accelerator while it's on the field. But this card's amazing in this deck, especially with the Horus package and the Dia Bellstar stuff. Just being able to discard these cards out of your hand to generate even more value is great. Also, being able to banish this card from grave to Foolish Burial, a Volcanic, is huge. This is basically how you get to your scatter shot line. In addition to that, though, while this card's on the field, you can send a Volcanic card from your hand to grave, and if you do, you draw a card. So this card really increases the deck's overall ceiling, in my opinion, which is why we play the Volcanic Rockets, because Rocket can obviously just get this straight to your hand, which is really, really cool, because, again, this is not a Volcanic card, so it is not searchable off a Trooper. That's the only drawback, in my opinion, but just something to note. Up next, we play 1 copy of Volcanic Inferno, 1 copy of Volcanic Emission. These are the 2 new Volcanic traps that came with the most recent wave of support. Usually you're going to be setting one of these off of the Volcanic Emperor's effect. Inferno just is like an impermanence with a 500 burn. And then Emission's really cool. This allows you to either take a Volcanic from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it, ignoring summoning conditions, but return it to the hand at end phase. Or you can target a Pyro monster on the field and inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. But if I targeted a Pyro I control, the damage is halved. So either way, the Emission plays into this deck's FTK line, and then Inferno is just something that you can just set up if you just need a generic monster negate, which is really strong. And then the last card, again, 45 card list, is the 1 Spiritual Fire Art Kurenai. This is what you're searching off of the Greater Inari Fire monster when it's sent from the field to grave. And this card has a simple effect: you tribute a fire and then inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. Generally, your target for this will be the Emperor, so this card basically just says burn your opponent for 3,100, which is huge. So that rounds out the main deck, guys. Now we're going to be diving headfirst into the extra deck. Like I said, let me know what you guys think of the profile. Like and comment down below what you think so far, but now we're getting into the good stuff. So, of course, we play the Horus package, so we have a decent slew of rank 8s here at our disposal. We have 1 Coach King Giant Trainer, very good rank 8 for this deck. Not only does it help you dig deeper into your combos pieces and extenders, but also burns your opponent in the process. So, obviously, that just, benefits this deck greatly. Then we're also playing 1 copy of the Garunix Eternity Hyang of the Fire Kings from the newly released Fire King structure deck this past December. This card is a Pyro. Not that this deck locks you really, but the fact that it's just a generic rank 8 Pyro, upon its succeed summon, you can just destroy all other monsters on the field. Makes going second a total breeze. So we play 1 copy of that. And then we also play 1 copy of the #1 Infection Buzz King. Brand new out of the Maze of Millennia set. Again, just another amazing rank 8 for going second. Not only can it rip cards out of your opponent's extra deck, but it can also destroy monsters or cards they control. And if the card it destroyed was a monster, it burns your opponent for half of its attack, which is really, really strong, especially in this deck. And then the last Xyz we're playing is 1 copy of Superstar Slayer Typhon. Again, really good for going second, and into certain situations, Typhon can just answer a lot of different things, and I appreciate having it in this list. And then up next is just a slew of generic Link monsters that we can summon to help get our copies of Shell, Rimfire, whatnot in the graveyard. This deck doesn't have to extra deck summon that much, to be fair. It's more of a main deck focused strategy, but the extra deck here is just more of a toolbox in my opinion. Just things you can run. So we have 1 Salamagrade Almirage, 1 Relinquished Anima, and 1 Link Rebo for our Link 1s. Again, this deck does play a lot of low attack and level 1 monsters, so you want to have stuff you can link them off with. These cards all being great targets in their own right. Again, Anima's here because he is a spellcaster, so if you need access into your Greater Inari Fire play, you can just, link off one of your level 1s to make this, and then him plus any other level 4 lower fire can make the Greater Inari Fire monster out of your deck, which is pretty cool. Then we're on the 1 IP, 1 followed by 1 SP Little Knight. Again, this package is optional. Again, I know SPs are really expensive. You do not have to play it if you're on a budget. You can definitely sub both of these for something else. What that is, I'll leave that at your discretion. But then we also play 1 copy of Doolittle Chimera, followed by 1 Pit Knight Early, and 1 Salaman Great Sunlight Wolf. Obviously really generic and awesome fire link monsters that this deck can just take full advantage of. Then to round out the last link 2 is 1 copy of Hida the Fire Charmer. Can't have a fire deck and not be running this card. This card is just too cracked on its own to not run. And then we also play the 1 copy of Promethean Princess and round that out with 1 copy of Amphibious Swarmship Ambler Whale to round out our 15 card extra deck. Now, I did not prepare a side deck for this particular list. That's not because I didn't want to. It's just that, honestly, I feel like I'm kind of torn on what I want the side deck to be. Like, do I want, like, hand traps in the sides? Do I want, like, cards that burn the opponent? I just was kind of, like, torn and going back and forth with myself of how I wanted the side to look. But to be fair, this deck is really great going first or second. Going first, it can set up, like, insane lines that lead down to an FTK. That where you'll just game your opponent during their draw phase with the amount of burn effects you have. And then going second, this deck can just pump out so much damage and resources while also burning your opponent in the process that you can just OTK like it's nothing. So to be fair, I feel like this deck, quite honestly, doesn't need to side all that much. You know, depending on the build and the matchup you have, obviously a side deck is always helpful, but again, not required in this game, obviously. But like I said, for the purposes of this particular profile, I chose not to make one. So I guess, you know, you kind of just use your imagination if you guys want to build this deck and just make a side that's tailored to your needs, I suppose. But with all that being said, that's going to wrap up my take on Volcanic for the March 2024 format. Like I said, let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. Let me know also if you guys want to see combos and test hands. Like I said, this deck has a very spicy FTK line. If you guys want to see how that works, definitely let me know in the comments. I have no problem bringing you combos and test hands for this deck. But with that being said, make sure you're liked and subscribed so you don't miss out on any more of my uploads. And this is Nick hitting that end phase. Peace.